Reformed thinking.
Yeah, that is the banner we are flying under today.
Welcome back. We are so glad you are here with us. As always, we are coming to you as two friends, two students of Scripture who hold to the historic Christian faith. Specifically, we are standing firm on the Westminster Confession of Faith.
That is right. We believe in a sovereign God, a God who orders all things according to the counsel of his will. And usually, when we sit down to talk theology, we are looking at the heavy hitters, things like justification, sanctification, eschatology.
Right, the big concepts that take up whole chapters in the systematic theology books.
Yeah, but today we are doing something different. We're looking at a very small word.
A tiny word. It is a three-letter root in Hebrew. And I had to be honest with you. When I first looked at this stack of notes for today, the lexicons, the concordances, the journal articles, I thought, are we really going to get an entire deep dive out of this?
I had the same thought at first.
But the more I read, the more I realized this word is everywhere.
It really is. It connects geography, agriculture, genealogy, sociology, and even the emotional life of the believer. It touches on all of it.
So let us introduce the subject. What is the word for the day?
The word is Peleg. In Hebrew, the root is PLG, Pe, Lamed, Gimel.
Peleg. And for anyone who has read through Genesis, that name probably rings a bell. Peleg, the son of Eber.
Right. He appears in the genealogy of Shem. But the word Peleg isn't just a name. It is a noun that appears all over the Old Testament, from the Psalms to the prophets. And, well, it presents us with a really interesting tension right from the start.
It does. Because if you look at the basic definition in something like Brown Driver Briggs, which, for our listeners, is the standard Hebrew lexicon we use, the primary meaning implies division, to split something.
Correct. A division or a cleft.
But then you flip a few pages, look at how it is used in Psalm 1 or Psalm 65, and it is translated as a stream or a river. So here's the mission for this session. How do we get from division to stream? How can one word mean to split apart and also mean a flowing body of water?
It seems completely contradictory at first glance. I mean, a split sounds like a separation, a breaking apart. A stream sounds like a connection, a continuous flow. But in the Semitic mind, and specifically in the Hebrew language, these two concepts are practically identical.
And understanding why they are identical is going to completely change how you read passages like Psalm 1.
Spot on. It is like a detective story. We have the clues in front of us, we have the cognate languages, the ancient usage, the context, and we have to piece it together.
So let us unpack this. Let us start at the very bottom with the root itself, PLG.
Let us do it. So when we do lexical research, we don't just look at Hebrew in a vacuum. We look at the neighbors. We look at the cousin languages to see what the root meant in the ancient Near East.
Right, the cognates.
Exactly. If you look at Akkadian, which is the language of ancient Babylon and Assyria, the word is palgu. And strictly speaking, palgu means a ditch or a canal.
A ditch. That is not a very poetic word.
No, it isn't meant to be poetic at all. It is meant to be highly functional. Think about where Abraham came from. Ur of the Chaldees? Mesopotamia?
Land between the rivers.
Yes, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Now, we really need to get into the mind of an ancient farmer in that specific region. If you live in Israel, you wait for the rain. Deuteronomy tells us Israel is a land of hills and valleys that drinks water from the rain of heaven.
But if you live in Babylon...
If you live in Babylon, it hardly ever rains.
So you're totally dependent on the rivers.
You are dependent on the rivers. But here is the major problem. The Tigris and Euphrates are wild. They flood violently in the spring, they wipe out everything in their path, destroying crops, and then they drop terribly low in the summer when you actually need the water the most.
You cannot just set up your farm right on the banks of a wild river like that.
Yeah.
It is way too dangerous.
Right. So what do?
You dig.
You take a shovel and you cut a gash in the dry earth. You make a split. You divert water from the big, chaotic river into a small, controlled dish that leads directly to your field. That ditch is the palgu.
Okay, that's just to make sense. The word doesn't actually describe the water itself. It describes the cut in the ground.
Precisely. The cut is the primary focus. Now look at the Arabic cognate. The word falj means a gap or a crack in the ground, or the verb form falaja, which means to split or to divide.
So in Arabic, it is a crack. In Akkadian, it is a ditch.
And if we look at Ethiopic, the word falag means a river or a stream. In Tigrinya, it means a riverbed or a gorge.
So we have a crack, a ditch, a riverbed, and a stream. I am starting to see the picture here. It really isn't primarily about the fluid, is it?
No, and that is the key insight we need to grasp today. The root meaning isn't water. The root meaning is the cleft. It is the literal cut in the earth. The peleg is the channel. It is the division of the land that allows the water to flow.
That makes so much sense when you think about the geography. If you stand in a dry climate, and the Bible was written in a very dry climate, and you see water flowing, it is almost always because there is a cut in the earth. A wadi, a gorge, or a ditch.
That is it. And this leads us to the most crucial distinction we need to make, especially when we look at the biblical text itself. There are several different words for river in Hebrew. You have nahar, which is like a big perennial river. Think of the Nile or the Euphrates. That is a massive natural force.
The wild river, the one you can't control.
Right. Then you have Natal, which is often a seasonal torrent. That is the wadi that floods suddenly when it rains in the mountains and then dries up completely in the summer.
But Peleg is different.
Peleg is distinct. The lexicon, the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament defines Peleg specifically as an artificial water channel or canal.
Artificial.
Yeah.
That implies intent. That implies a design.
It implies a digger. A peleg doesn't just happen randomly. A nahar, a big river, just happens. It follows the path of least resistance. Gravity does all the work over thousands of years. But a peleg is engineered. It is a channel cut specifically to direct water from a source to a very specific destination.
Okay, this is where it gets incredibly fascinating for me. Because when we apply that engineered channel definition to Scripture, the theology starts to take on a very specific, beautiful shape. Let us look at Psalm 1.
Oh, the classic text, yes.
Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. And then down in verse 3, and he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. That phrase right there, rivers of water, is Paul's mean.
Yes, it is. And if we translate that according to the root meaning we just discussed, it is, he shall be like a tree transplanted by the irrigation canals of water.
That changes the image entirely. I think a lot of us, when we read Psalm 1, we imagine a tree growing wild in a forest next to a bubbling natural brook. It is a very natural, almost romantic image of the wilderness.
Right, nature just doing its thing, a happy accident with geography. The seed just happened to fall near the water.
But the text uses the word shatul for planted, which implies being transplanted or deliberately set in a specific place, and it uses peleg for the water. This isn't a wild tree at all. This is an orchard.
It is an orchard. And that is purely Reformed theology captured in a single agricultural image. The godly man isn't godly because he happened to grow near water by chance. He is godly because the divine gardener took him, transplanted him, and dug a peleg, an intentional channel, to bring the life-giving water directly to his roots.
It speaks so clearly to providence.
It speaks to sovereign grace. A canal is a controlled grace. It is not a wild flood that washes the young tree away. It is not a drought that starves it. It is a specific, divided portion of water directed for the sole purpose of fruitfulness.
It makes me think about the intentionality of God in our everyday lives. If I am in a dry season or if I am in a fruitful season, it is not random. The channel has been cut specifically for me.
That is where the immense comfort lies. If you are a wild tree by a wild river, you are completely at the mercy of the elements. If the river floods, you drown. If the river dries up, you die. But if you are by a peleg, you are at the mercy of the irrigator. And the irrigator is good.
I am looking at the notes here on Isaiah 30, verse 25. It says, and there shall be upon every high mountain and upon every high hill rivers and streams of waters in the day of the great slaughter. The word there again is peleg.
Yes. And think about the physical context of that promise. High mountains don't naturally have rivers running across their peaks. Water flows down, not up.
So for there to be streams on the high mountains.
It implies a supernatural engineering. God is cutting channels where channels shouldn't logically exist. He is irrigating the barren heights. It is a picture of the restoration of the earth, where God routing his supply to places that would naturally be totally dry.
There is another verse that uses this, which I think is just visually stunning. Psalm 65, verse 9 in the English Bible, verse 10 in the Hebrew text. Thou visitest the earth and waterest it. Thou greatly enrichest it with the river of God, which is full of water.
Peleg Elohim, the Peleg of God.
The channel of God.
It is so fascinating that the psalmist calls it a Peleg. He could have easily called it the Nahar of God, the mighty, overwhelming Amazon of God. But he calls it the Peleg. Why do you think that is?
Because it is controlled.
Yes, because the rain isn't chaotic. We tend to think of weather as chaotic and unpredictable. But from God's perspective, the rain follows a precise channel. He has cut a path for the rain just as a farmer cuts a path for the irrigation in his field.
The river of God is full of water. It is never dry. The channel is always maintained. That is such a comfort to the believer. It means that the grace coming into our lives isn't accidental, it is channeled.
It is. And that concept of flow or fluid in a channel extends well beyond just water. The Hebrew writers use Peleg metaphorically for other fluids, and the imagery there is just as striking.
All right, I saw this in the notes on the book of Job. Job chapter 29, verse 6. Job is looking back on the good old days, before all his suffering began. He says, "When I washed my steps with butter, and the rock poured me out rivers of oil, Palgium, streams of oil."
This is hyperbole, obviously. But the image is based on an olive press. Usually oil just drips. You press the olives and it slowly drips out. It is very precious. It is a slow process. But Job says his past prosperity was so great, it was as if the rock itself was a Peleg, a canal gushing with olive oil.
That is a staggering amount of oil.
It is an overwhelming amount. And that is what the Peleg represents in that context, abundance, but abundance flowing in a specific direction. It is not oil just spilling all over the floor and being wasted. It is a channel of oil directed right at him.
And then on the flip side of that material abundance, you have the abundance of sorrow. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 48, Jeremiah says, "Mine eye runneth down with rivers of water for the destruction of the daughter of my people." Palgium, the exact same phrase as Psalm 1.
It is a stunning parallel to consider. In Psalm 1, the Palgium brings life and vitality to the tree. In Lamentations, the Palgium runs down the prophet's face in absolute grief.
It is literally saying, "Canals of water run down my eyes."
Think about the root meaning again. Division or cleft. Grief splits the face. Excessive sorrow cuts a channel down the cheek. It is not just a single lonely tear. It is a continuous, directed flow of sorrow.
That is an intense visual.
It is, and Psalm 119, verse 136 says the exact same thing. "Rivers of waters run down mine eyes, because they keep not thy law." It shows us that in the Hebrew mind, any copious flow, whether it is oil or tears or water, needs a Peleg. It needs a channel. It needs a division in the earth or in the face to carry it.
It prevents the image from being messy. Even in immense grief, there is a path. The tears have a track to run on.
Spot on. It is not a splash. It is a stream.
So we have thoroughly established the physical image. Peleg is a split, a cut, a channel, usually artificial, that directs a flow. Now, I want to pivot to the person, because this word is also a proper noun in Scripture.
It is, and this is where we get into Genesis 10 and the famous Table of Nations.
Genesis 10, verse 25. "And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided. Niflega Haaretz."
There's a verb form right there, niflida. It is the passive form of Peleg. The earth was divided.
So Peleg is the man of the division. He is Mr. Split.
Mr. Split, I like that. Now, the question that has occupied commentators and historians for centuries is this. What was the division? Because the text gives us a very specific chronological marker.
The text clearly says, "In his days the earth was divided." Now, I have heard some pretty wild theories about this over the years. I recall hearing someone suggest this was actually about plate tectonics.
Ah, yes, the continental drift theory.
Right, the idea that this verse pinpoints the exact moment when the continents physically ripped apart, Pangaea splitting up into the land masses we know today.
It is a very dramatic idea, and honestly, if you only look at the root word split or cleft, you can kind of see why someone might go there. A massive earthquake, a global geological severing.
But does that hold up to the lexical data and the context?
Most conservative scholars and linguists would say no, it absolutely doesn't. And the primary reason is context. Genesis 10 is not a geological survey of the planet. It is an ethnography. It is a detailed list of families, nations, and lands. It is fundamentally about people.
So inserting a massive geological event into a list of uncles and cousins seems totally out of place.
It breaks the literary genre completely. Plus, the timeline would be very difficult to reconcile with other historical data. So if it is not a physical splitting of the rocks, it must be a splitting of the people.
Which naturally brings us to the Tower of Babel.
Theory A. And this is the one that fits the theology and narrative flow of Genesis best. Genesis 10 gives us the genealogy, it tells us the who. Then Genesis 11 gives us the event, it tells us the how. They are not strictly chronological chapters, they overlap.
So the division of the earth is the linguistic and political splitting of humanity at Babel.
Right. Eberon names his son Peleg as a historical marker of the times. Just like someone might name a child Liberty after a major revolution, or how Lamech named Noah, which means rest, in hope of relief from the curse. Peleg is a living, breathing monument to the judgment at Babel.
This is the son born when God split the world.
Yes. And think about the image of the Peleg again, the canal. At Babel, humanity wanted to be one massive, stagnant pool. They said, let us make a name for ourselves lest we be scattered. They wanted to be a reservoir.
And God said no.
God said no. He came down and cut channels. He divided their languages. He trenched the earth with boundaries. He forced them to flow in different directions.
Acts 17 touches on this when it says, he determined the bounds of their habitation.
It is controlled separation once again. It wasn't just a random explosion of people. It was an irrigation of the earth. He spread humanity out so they could fulfill his original command to fill the earth.
Now, there's another theory mentioned in the research notes, Theory C, that Peleg might actually refer to a place name.
This is an interesting angle, too. We have ancient records of a town called Falga located on the Euphrates River, right near where the Chebar River flows into it.
Falga. That sounds remarkably similar to Peleg.
It does, and there's also a region down in Arabia called El Falj. So some scholars think the name Peleg simply denotes the geographical region where that specific branch of the family settled down. They suggest it means he of the district or he of the canal region.
Because that whole area of Mesopotamia was famous for its irrigation canals.
It was literally the land of canals. If you lived there, your very life depended on the palgu, the ditch. So naming your son Peleg might be akin to naming him river or banks or brook today.
It is a possible explanation. But the text explicitly adds the commentary. For in his days the earth was divided. That explicit theological commentary seems to push us back to a specific event, not just a geography.
I agree completely. The Bible explains the name for us. And looking at it through a reformed lens of history, we see God as the sovereign Lord of time. He marks epochs. The life of Peleg marked a fundamental shift in how humanity existed, moving from one monolingual mass to a divided, diverse world.
Notice the lineage here. Peleg is the son of Eber, and Eber is the father of the Hebrews.
Right. This is the line of Shem. This is the messianic line.
So, out of the grand division of the nations of Babel, God is channeling one specific stream. The stream of Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serug, Nahor, Terah, and finally Abraham.
That is a beautiful thought. The division wasn't just a scattering of the wicked, it was a narrowing for the righteous. God was cutting a Peleg, a very specific channel of redemptive history, isolating the line of the Messiah from the general chaos of the surrounding nations.
It brings us right back to that idea of the artificial channel. Grace is particular. It flows exactly where the gardener directs it.
And that leads us perfectly to another fascinating aspect of this word. We have looked at the physical water, and we have looked at the historical person. Now I want to look at the social application. Because the word Peleg, or its feminine forms, Pel and Mithligot, is used to describe how groups of people are organized.
Sections. Divisions of people.
Yes. And this brings us to one of the most debated and controversial passages involving this word in the whole Old Testament. Judges chapter 5.
The Song of Deborah.
The Song of Deborah. It is written in a very archaic Hebrew. It is highly poetic, and it is notoriously difficult to translate. In verses 15 and 16, Deborah is singing a victory song, but she's also calling out the tribes who came to fight and roasting the tribes who stayed home.
And Reuben is the one getting heavily roasted here.
Reuben takes the brunt of it. The text says, depending on your English translation, for the divisions of Reuben there were great thoughts of heart. Or, in other versions, by the streams of Reuben there were great searchings of heart.
So which one is it? Is it divisions or is it streams?
The underlying Hebrew phrase is either biplaget or liplaget. It comes directly from PLG.
The lexical sources seem totally split on this. BDB acknowledges both possibilities as valid.
Here is the tension in the passage. If you translate it as streams, the picture is this. The tribe of Reuben lived over on the other side of the Jordan River. They had incredible pasture land, lots of water, lots of grass, lots of sheep.
So they were just sitting around by their nice irrigation canals, their pelagim.
Right. They are lounging by the quiet waters, listening to the bleating of the flocks. Verse 16 explicitly mentions them listening to the bleating of the flocks. And they are sitting there thinking, should we go fight with Deborah? It sounds pretty dangerous. We are quite comfortable right here by the water.
So translating it as streams of Reuben implies laziness, comfort, and a refusal to engage in the hard work of the kingdom.
Exactly. But if you translate it as divisions of Reuben, it implies a political situation. The clan was split. PLG. They were divided into factions. One group wanted to go fight, another group wanted to stay home. They had great searchings of heart, meaning lots of committee meetings, lots of intense debate.
But absolutely no action.
No action at all. They were completely paralyzed by their internal divisions.
Which interpretation do you think fits the context better? The geographical streams or the political divisions?
I think the sheer brilliance of Hebrew poetry is that it is probably meant to evoke both. The geography actually dictated the sociology. Because they were physically separated from the rest of Israel by the Jordan River, which is a channel, and because they were so comfortable by their agricultural streams, they naturally became socially divided and indecisive.
That is a very serious warning for us. The Peleg, the channel, can be a source of incredible life, like we saw in Psalm 1. But if you get too comfortable sitting by it, or if you let internal divisions paralyze you, you completely miss the call of God, like we see here in Judges 5.
It is a stark contrast. It is the difference between being a tree planted by the water that actually produces fruit and a man just sitting by the water merely thinking about fruit while the battle rages somewhere else.
That is such a good summary. Great searchings of heart, but zero boots on the ground.
Now, there is a redeeming use of this social division concept later in the biblical text. If we fast forward to the books of Chronicles.
The extensive lists of names that usually make people's eyes glaze over during their daily Bible reading.
The glorious, inspired lists of names. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 35, verse 5, and again in verse 12, we find the word Peleget or Miflaget. And in this context, it refers to the priests and the Levites.
The divisions of the priesthood.
Yes. Josiah says, "Prepare yourselves by the houses of your fathers, after your courses, according to the writing of Solomon." The priests were organized into divisions.
So here, division doesn't mean schism or sinful separation. It doesn't mean they were fighting and debating like the tribe of Reuben.
Yeah. No, here PLG means order. It means structure. Just as an irrigation canal directs water so it doesn't just form a stagnant swamp, the priestly divisions directed the service of God so it wasn't just a chaotic mob in the temple.
That is a key insight for Reformed ecclesiology. We deeply believe in decent and orderly worship.
God is a God of order. He divides the vast number of Levites into shifts, or courses, so that the worship of the temple can be a continuous, unbroken flow.
Oh, I see the connection you were making. The agricultural Peleg makes the water flow continuously. The Peluga, the priestly divisions, make the worship flow continuously.
Precisely. Think about the logistics. If every single priest showed up to work at the exact same time, it would be absolute chaos. People would be tripping over each other. But if no one showed up, the fire on the altar would go out. But by dividing them into manageable courses, the fire never goes out. The flow of worship is maintained perfectly by the wise division of the laborers.
That is fantastic. So let us try to synthesize all of this data. We have covered a significant amount of ground today.
We really have, from ditches to priests.
We have the root PLG. We saw the physical cleft in the desert from the Akkadian and Arabic cognates. We saw the artificial irrigation canal that brings life in Psalm 1. We saw the historical epic of Peleg, where nations were linguistically divided in Genesis 10. We saw the social paralysis of Reuben sitting by the streams in Judges. And we just saw the orderly service of the temple in Chronicles.
It is a massive spectrum of meaning for just 3 Hebrew letters. But if you look closely at all of them, there is a single common thread running through every single usage.
Controlled separation.
Controlled separation, or you could call it channeled flow. Whether we are talking about water or human history or the nations of the earth or temple priests, it is always about taking a mass of something and directing it into specific paths for a specific purpose.
That synthesis brings us right to Proverbs 21, verse 1. I feel like this verse is the absolute capstone of our discussion today.
It really is. The verse says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will."
And rivers of water there is Pelgemame.
The exact same phrase. The irrigation canals.
Think about that imagery for a second. The king, the most powerful man on earth in the ancient mind. In his own mind, he is a raging, unstoppable river. He does what he wants. He floods wherever he wants to flood.
He thinks he is a wild Nahar, but the text says, no, to God the king's heart is just fluid in a ditch, and God is the one holding the shovel.
That is incredibly humbling.
It is the ultimate statement of divine sovereignty. God is the divine irrigator. He cuts a channel over here, and the king's heart flows this way. He blocks a channel over there, and the king's heart flows that way. The king might not even know he is being directed. He thinks he is deciding foreign policy or domestic law. But the entire landscape of human history is being trenched and managed by God's providence.
For a Reformed listener, that is the bedrock of our comfort. We look at the world today, we look at global politics, we look at the shifting divisions of the nations, and it often looks like absolute chaos. It looks like a terrifying flood.
But we know it is not a flood. It is a Peleg. It is a highly designed system. The water is going exactly where the gardener intends it to go to water his field.
And that applies even in our personal lives. We talked about the streams of tears and lamentations. Even our personal sorrow isn't spelling out randomly onto the ground.
No, it isn't. Psalm 56 says, "Put thou my tears into thy bottle." But the Peleg image suggests God also provides a specific channel for them. Even our deepest grief has a course. It has a boundary set by God. It is part of the spiritual irrigation of our souls.
You know, it reminds me of that Arabic cognate you mentioned way at the beginning, falaja, to have a successor or to be an heir,
Yes, the familial line.
and the connection to the genealogy of Peleg leading down to Abraham. All these channels we have discussed today, the channel of history, the channel of prophecy, the channel of the priesthood, they are all flowing toward one singular termination point.
They all flow to Christ. He is the ultimate branch. He is the living water, and he is the one who was cut off or divided for his people.
And from his pierced side flowed water and blood, the ultimate stream of redemption.
The ultimate stream. And think about the river of life described in Revelation 22. It flows clear as crystal from the throne of God and of the Lamb. It is the final Peleg Elohim, a perfectly ordered, life-giving flow that heals the nations, the very same nations that were divided back in Peleg's day.
That is a beautiful full circle, from the division and scattering of Genesis 10 to the healing and gathering of the nations in Revelation 22.
And right in the middle of all that history, we have the church, planted like trees by the Pulch Mame, drawing water, bearing fruit in due season.
This has been such an enlightening study. It really shows that you can't just skim the surface of these biblical words. You have to dig the ditch. You have to do the lexical work to uncover the beauty.
The treasures are way down deep.
Before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on. We look at two main images of people relating to these streams today. In Psalm 1, the man is planted by the streams. He is rooted. He is drawing sustenance. He is productive.
Right. And in Judges 5, the men of Reuben merely sat by the streams. They were comfortable. They were undecided. They were paralyzed by analysis.
One used the stream for life. The other used the stream for leisure. So the question for you today is this. Which one are you? Are you planted in the Word, drawing up that water to produce actual fruit for God's kingdom? Or are you just sitting by the bank, enjoying the view, listening to the bleating of the flocks, maybe just listening to deep dives like this one, but never actually getting up to join the battle?
That is the real question. The channel is there. The water of the Word is flowing. What are you going to do with it?
Something to think about as you go about your week. Thanks for diving in with us on Reformed Thinking.
See you next time.